1 week season.
1 week season, fam. La Familia. Welcome back. Is DFS FanDuel Labs Week 10, 1 week season coming to you. My name is Mike Johnson, M Johnson 86, as I am known in those DFS and best ball streets. Best ball, speaking of. My co-host, Mr. Maximus Steve, has a few teams I've seen near the top of the drafters leaderboards. Exciting stuff. Don't forget about that in the off season. You can check us out for our Best Ball Plus product. But yeah, otherwise, we are halfway through the NFL season, 9 weeks down, 9 to go. Had kind of a crazy last week. There was a lot that went on. Injuries continued to pile up. Lot to dissect this week, lot to dive into. I'll bring in my co-host, Maximus. How we doing?
Hello. Yeah, we got off the trade deadline yesterday. There's some moves made that'll be instrumental for a few teams. My heritage team, the Commanders, picked up Lattimore. That should be interesting going forward to shore up the defense for that team. And yeah, a lot of interesting, or at least a few interesting moves, I guess, leading into week 10. Week 10, wow, double digits.
Yeah, it comes up quick, halfway through the season, but there's a lot going on. And then, last week, on FanDuel, it was a 14-game slate with the Sunday night game included, 13 on DraftKings. But this week we've got a London game. I believe it's the Giants-Panthers playing Sunday morning in either London. No, it's in Germany, I believe.
Munich.
Yeah. And then we've got 4 teams on bye this week. Some, fairly relevant, teams as far as like the players that are involved and how popular they usually are. So, you remove those 6 teams and all of a sudden you're down to, on FanDuel, an 11-game slate. Kind of naturally condenses the player pool a little bit. I like these size slates a little bit better. Generally I do a lot of afternoon only stuff. And I have an article that goes up in the scroll every week for Inner Circle members. And yeah, the afternoon only slate, I don't really like when it's just like 3 games in the late window. I like when it's like 5. And then for the main slates, I like when it's a little smaller. So kind of that 5 to 10 range, 5 to 11 range is nice. So kind of helps us, makes it a little easier to narrow things down. So it'll be an interesting week and got to kind of change gears. There's just different dynamics. How was your week 9 personally?
Yeah, small in the loss column. I had a few teams that placed in the 5-entry max tournament. I usually do. I did dip my toe into the Blitz, I think it's called, where it's 222 an entry. I had a team in there that just missed the money line. I think it was at 136.16, just under it. We did have a sister company guy that took it down in a Squirrel Patrol, who I know does the solo ship show. Say that 5 times with JM, and congrats to him. He did have quite a bit of entries in. I will say that caveat. I don't know if he maxed it out or not, but he definitely had a lot of teams. But great for him. I think it was coming off him switching over to that being a show on our channel that you can check out later in the week. But yeah, most of what I put in our FanDuel Discord, I think, was pretty consistent with what took place. I know we were both on Burrow and Bengals stacks, and then I had a good amount of Saquon, who obviously just went nuclear. But then I had other spots like the Packers defense. I had DJ Moore, just some other examples of situations that didn't work out to where I was just either barely crossing the money line, but no sweats for me this past week. What about you?
Yeah, kind of the same. My running back, Barkley, Achane, Chase Brown, Got on Eckler when the Brian Robinson news came out, but those were kind of my heaviest exposure running backs, the guys I was highest on, and that worked out well. And then I had a good amount of Gesicki. I had more Gesicki on DraftKings than on FanDuel, but I did play him a decent amount on FanDuel, just not it was like 40% on DraftKings. Really, it was the wide receiver position I kind of whiffed on. A lot of wide receiver spots that Olave going out, the Cowboys, kind of just rug pulled again. They just couldn't get it going, and then Dak's hurt, CD's hurt, so just a lot going on. I'll share my screen. Just quick go over one roster just for fun. So this was my highest scoring roster in the Sunday Million. Took 549th place, which I actually believe they expanded either this or the $3 rush contest this week. You can see I had Chase Brown and Gesicki together, had Saquon, and then I had, Cousins, Mooney, and Dowdle. So, this one was close. It just, the Cowboys basically didn't do anything in the second half. And then I had Keon Coleman there, which, I moved when Amari Cooper was ruled out. I moved up. I did another run and moved up Coleman, Shakir, and Kincaid, just as the guys that, I was just like, hey, I think we talked about it last week, right? Didn't we build around the Bills?
Yeah, Coleman dropped a touchdown early on.
Yeah, he dropped a touchdown. Are you talking about the one that got intercepted?
Yeah, it bounced. I don't think he was ready for it on the slant.
Yeah,
route.
And then Ramsey caught it. Yeah, but I mean, either way, it's one of those things where, like, I think evaluating like process and that sort of thing is important. So, like, directionally, like, this roster was one that could have won. You look at the Bills, like we talked about it last week. We think the Bills are going to score a lot of points. Okay, well, they scored 30 points. They settled for 3 field goals. Allen threw 3 touchdowns, but one was to the backup running back. One was to their wide receiver 4, basically Matt Collins, who became the wide receiver 3 when Amari was ruled out, but kind of the lowest probability guy. Like, he, and then one was to Quentin Morris. So you look at that roster with Coleman, and yeah, I mean, basically, if the Buffalo, the winning, this ended up with 175 points. The winning roster was 218. So, I mean, it's 40 points. It's not like it was right there. But at the same time, if Dallas keeps going, maybe Rico gets a little more, maybe Mooney gets pushed over the 100-yard barrier. Cousins can get to 300 at another touchdown. Like, it was right there. You just need the, you need all those game environments to kind of break the right way in these large fields things. But that's also where like contest selection comes into play. And I think that's why you've been able to have a couple nice scores this year, because you're playing a little bit smaller field contests and being able to not have to be quite as perfect to get paid off when you make those good rosters. So kudos to you there.
Yeah, you don't have to be as optimal. It's interesting. If Bass doesn't hit a 61-yard field goal, we got extra football too between Achane and the Bills offense. So we really could have even benefited more, but he made that unbelievable 61-yarder that ended the game, actually. So there was a couple different factors. We had the right spot. He just, you can't predict injuries when they happen in a game. I think Keon Coleman may have had an injury that kept him out a little bit of it at some point. And then you can't predict where the ball, it's the offense is going to score, but it's just a question of, is it the guys that you chose for that particular roster or not? So,
right. All right. Well, on to week 10. let's get building. You got any thoughts on how we start this thing?
Yeah, I want to go away from early in the week this week, from the game totals, the team totals, the spreads. I mean, all that is important, but I kind of want to build. I want our start to be on something that is more of a trend, and it's piggybacking off a comment JM made during Best Ball, and that's on a particular team. He goes, "What if?" He had a "what if" question. What if this team doesn't wind up operating the way that they're perceived to operate based on the coaching changes and the personnel? And then I have a little bit of info, and then I'll get into it from Fantasy Points, which love those guys over there. This offense has posted a plus 5.8 pass rate over expectation since week 7, a mark that would rank 4th highest over the full season. And over that stretch, this quarterback ranks 2nd in passing yards per game, so he's hovering in that 300-yard, pass bonus range. 6th in pass attempts, and 10th in fantasy points per game. And then I took a peek at the pricing of this core stack that I want to start with, and it filters to the other trend that I'm seeing, and especially with touchdowns being valuable in FanDuel, playing running backs who either have gotten their money or that have been extended, who have robust roles where the teams are just going for broke, using them relentlessly, running and pass catching. So the core stack I want to start with this week is Justin Herbert of the Los Angeles Chargers, and I want to double stack him with McConkey and Quentin Johnston. These guys' prices are absolutely affordable to construct a plus EV, especially with the running backs, team to continue building this. But, some of that information kind of jumped out at me when I was reading through some early week information about how teams are trending. And the Chargers, albeit it's not a good game total, they're playing a very bad team in Tennessee. But clearly, Justin Herbert's heating up. He's trusting these guys. These pass catchers are getting very relevant targets over the past 3 to 4 weeks. Joshua Palmer's another receiver. You could, if you're doing multiple entries, you could probably add on another stack of this offense. And then you got easy bringbacks with Tony Pollard. Kind of falls in that bucket of running backs who got big contracts, and they are playing the part of getting said contract. Also, Calvin Ridley is a route you could go, and you also don't even need a bring back, I feel. I think it's just, in my opinion, looking over the slate so far, there's clearly very other good game spots, but the pricing on some of the cores you would want to go with kind of leave you searching for value that inevitably may open up later in the week when we get injury reports and different changes maybe in personnel. But on the face of it, I like this as a starting point to build around. And then, again, you could have a clear bring back with Pollard or Ridley, or you don't necessarily need to bring back. And I think this will create a pathway to pass the baton to you to where you want to go, especially at the running back spot. Because if we get a efficient defense in there, we're going to have a lot of salary to target players that we want to target who are developing robust roles based on, big contracts are being extended, like somebody like Kamara, for example. But I'll pass it back to you there.
Yeah. I like that. I like the idea there with just from a macro standpoint of that was kind of one of my first instincts when I looked at the slate. And I had a little more time yesterday than I have in recent weeks to kind of dig in and get a feel for where things are at. And one of the things that stood out to me is like at the top end, at the top end of like salary. So Justin Jefferson is way up there, obviously. Lamb is going to be without Dak. St. Brown is like, he's a fine option, but also just generally compared to the running backs at that price tier, it's tougher. And then the Eagles guys, it's hard to know. AJ Brown, he's dealing with an injury. Devontae Smith, kind of overpriced in my opinion. So I guess where I'm going is to spend at the higher end running back, it does kind of funnel you that way. But this is a type of stack where you're looking at about 19K combined. So that's, 3X would be 57 points. So basically you're looking for 60 from the group. I do kind of think if we're going this way, I like going ahead and playing Ridley. I don't think you have to have a bring back, but if you are going to, so I think you could stack Herbert with McConkey or Herbert with Johnston, and it's pretty good. I think if you're double stacking it in any sort of a decent sized tournament, you are probably going to need the Titans to not just completely fall flat. And I like Ridley. If you look at his last 4 games, obviously he has the goose egg there against Indy, but 8, 9, 15, and 8 targets. He had the big game. He hasn't scored a touchdown in that span, which, regression doesn't always happen, but I mean, we're talking about 40 targets in the last 4 games without a touchdown. So yeah, and I think, there are some other options like Nick Westbrook-Akine, like some other guys on the Titans that have he scored the touchdown last week, but on FanDuel, that's where the pricing comes in. Ridley's 5,800, Westbrook-Akine is 5,400. Even Boyd at 47, you're not really saving that much. So just play the alpha, just play the stud. So, and then what that opens up for you, if we throw in a defense here, let's just go down. I'll just for now throw the Commanders in. Doesn't have to stay that way, but just to give us an idea what we're looking at for salary. So you have 7,900, 2 running backs, flex, tight end. We can come to tight end later. But yeah, at the running back position, one guy that stands out to me right away is Breece Hall. I actually had him in the buy low article for our season long stuff this last week. His last couple games have kind of disappointed, 9.4 and 9.5 FanDuel points. But, excuse me, too loud. But the way that Rodgers hooked up with Adams and Wilson, I think is really good for the outlook of that Jets offense. And then this week facing Arizona, I think Hall. I really like him going forward. I'll let you pick the next running back while I tend to this little guy.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going with Hall there, I think it would definitely be feasible to maybe do a double running back there. James Conner just looked incredible last week. I don't know what happened to the Bears defense that they just all of a sudden couldn't stop the run. But, at Arizona, you can run on the Jets. Maybe you do a little Breece Hall, James Conner correlation there as a second running back. But I actually want to go to the tight end spot because my next spot, game environment wise, kind of going away from the trend of the Herbert core, I think you definitely probably need exposure to that San Francisco Tampa Bay game. And Cade Otton has just been an absolute target monster with Mayfield's top 2 options obviously still out. Cade Otton, 6,400, still relatively a fair price based on what his role has become. And then that frees up some salary as well. Let's say you leave Breece Hall in. I think James Conner is viable, but I mean, if you didn't want to do that, maybe taking either a mini correlation or at least having a piece of that Tampa San Fran matchup, and then that leaves you obviously with money for either one of the high end running backs in the flex or wide receivers Well, I guess on the wide receiver end, you probably have JJ because of the uncertainty of some of the other guys. Because I'm not sure, we don't really know about CeeDee Lamb yet. We don't know about AJ Brown yet. And I'm assuming Nico Collins, I think, comes back this week. But yeah, obviously it frees up a lot of salary there to finish out the build. Or it could even be K. Dotton and maybe Debo as a bring back to do a mini correlation with that game. I mean, I know Christian McCaffrey is also scheduled to come back this week. A lot of uncertainty there, as far as is he going to be just back to full tilt, what we know C-Mac to be, or is he going to be more limited? A lot of question marks. So probably better to go with the more certain spots that we feel good about early on, and then for the sake of finishing the build, I guess.
Yeah, and I think so that's where, some of this stuff later in the week will get a little more directionally. We'll get, kind of shown, some pathways that make a little more sense. Obviously, Nico is a big deal. AJ Brown knee is a big deal. Debo had the oblique thing, but then they had the bye. That's a big deal. So yeah, there's, a lot of ways you can go with it. I don't think you can play McCaffrey this week. He's just like, with where he's priced, and we don't even know how much he's going to play. Like, I mean, sure, he could score 2 or 3 touchdowns on limited work, but you basically need him to kind of break even with how we're seeing a lot of these other running backs perform. So, for me, that's like a no. I really like Bijan Robinson this week at New Orleans, who just fired their coach. Season's kind of circling the drain at this point. So I like him a lot. I think what you find is I think Bijan he's consistently having these good games, and he hasn't had like that ceiling type game, but his skill set is not one that can't or won't have ceiling type games. So he's the guy that, like, I'm just going to kind of keep going back to the well on, especially in these really good matchups. Kind of like Saquon did last week. I think eventually Bijan is going to have this game where he catches a touchdown, he runs for a touchdown, gets 100 yards, and, posts like a 30, 35 point game. So I'm really high on him. Hey, buddy. And then, I think James Conner is interesting because I guess the one worry I have with him, he took a little bit of a hit. The practice reports will be interesting to see this week. I don't know if you watched the game, but he had like a pretty impressive run, but then he took a big hit, fell funny at the end of it at the 1 yard line. And then he came out, Trey Benson got the touchdown. Then Demercado had the long touchdown run before half. I mean, he's still the lead back for sure. But with some of these veteran guys you get later in the year, it does worry me a little bit that, like, just they'll be more willing to replace him in other spots as these other guys gain a little trust. So not like a talk you off him sort of situation, but I do believe his salary came down this week though, which is interesting. And then it becomes, if that's our roster right now, we've got $600 left. You could spend a little more on a defense, but then also with the double stack, I'd kind of alluded to it earlier, is are there guys who are priced a little higher than one of or both McConkey or Johnston? Johnston had the nice game last week on 5 targets. McConkey led them in targets again. Like, for instance, you could go off, but I don't know, he might be in bad graces with the coaches, but like you could get up to DJ Moore there in a great matchup with the Patriots. So Just a lot of options there with how you go by it. The other thing that kind of stood out to me is instead of Connor, if you wanted to play George Kittle, the double tight end this week is one that when I was looking through it, made a little sense to me as a potential way, to build. Last week, I didn't think a 2 tight end week was viable. Week before, I thought it was very viable. I was right on both. I do think that there's kind of enough spots on this slate that it could be viable. And, Otten and Kittle they're both basically the top receiving option on their respective teams at this point. Or at least that's how I'm kind of viewing them. I guess Kittle is probably kind of tied with Debo, but Otten is pretty clearly the top guy in Tampa. So positionally, I'm not too worried about that.
Yeah, the double tight end is, especially with those two particular guys, can be viable. We're not sure about I'm assuming Debo's going to play, but I guess we're not quite sure yet at this early in the week. But you put in Breece Hall, which is definitely a fine play, of course. But my thinking with the Herbert double, though, and you're right, if it's going to be double, you need to have a bring back. But is to try to, you can work this in a way where you have enough salary for the set it and forget it running backs, as I call them, like either Saquon or I actually kind of like sneakily Jonathan Taylor this week. I think the one thing that the Bills do struggle with a little bit is defending running backs. It is going to be Flacco, but I think JT will probably be under the radar when it comes to ownership and that kind of thing. At home, he may be in a spot where he can have one of the spike weeks that he usually has at some point during the season. But yeah, my main theme was at least having the option to get to your to those as close to workhorse as possible running backs who are definitely trending with their usage based on their either getting a big contract or getting extended in the case of Kamara. Although, to your point, New Orleans maybe they fired their coach and they're definitely circling the drain.
You kind of tying, putting a nice little bow on the whole thing here. If we go back to Connor instead of Bijan, and then I like the call with Jonathan Taylor. So the thing with Taylor that kind of stands out to me is I think the perception, he hasn't had like a great standout season. He had the one really good game against Chicago, but otherwise it's been kind of pedestrian. He was injured at one point. But last week against the Vikings, that was the first game Taylor has played with Joe Flacco as the starter. The 2 games Flacco started coincided with when Taylor was injured. So he comes back, season high, 5 targets. It doesn't look like much on the spreadsheet, 3 catches for 11 yards. But Taylor's always kind of been that yardage and touchdown type back, and you're relying on that. So if you add that to his toolbox, kind of where he could be seeing 5 to 7 targets in a game against a good offense like the Bills. I think, I'll be interested to see how the field plays it, but he's a guy that I mentioned as like going forward. I'm bullish on Taylor with Flacco, just adding that receiving aspect to his game. And then if you do that, what you're left with, you can kind of make that same bet as we were talking about with Bijan. The Falcons defense kind of fits perfectly in there at 4,300.
Yeah, obviously there'll be a good defense this week. Did I thought I read that they were trying to move the Bengals-Ravens game to Sunday night. Did you see that, or is that still a Thursday at this point?
I believe the Bengals-Ravens game is it's tomorrow night. It's Thursday.
Okay. I thought I read somewhere they're thinking about switching it to Sunday. I don't know if that would mean 2 Sunday night games, but I was parlaying that into obviously the Sunday night game is one to take into account, to not forget about. You have 2 teams with playoff aspirations. Obviously they're salaries and the spread out nature of one of the offenses is, kind of tough to figure out, kind of a puzzle to figure out from week to week. But like Joe Mixon, for instance, had a great year, but this will easily be his toughest challenge against a team that you typically don't target running backs against. So I'm sure his ownership will be lower probably than it should be for his overall outlook on how he's performed this year. So another caveat just for the Sunday night game to keep that in mind in your building that we have to account for that you don't on DraftKings. But yeah, overall, I like where both of us went with this build so far.
Yeah, I'll add to that too with the Sunday night stuff. We talked about Nico Collins before. So if he is out, the Texans against the Jets, their offense, Stroud struggled a lot. I think he was like 11 for 30 or something. Took a bunch of sacks, had 1 or 2 picks. And that Lions defense, the Lions are, pretty clearly the best team in the NFC right now. So like the Lions defense at 4K, if the Texans don't get Nico back, I really like the Lions defense in that spot. I think they're pretty consistently scoring points. It's wild too. This game's in Houston. This is the Lions' 9th game, and it'll be their 8th game indoors. So Jared Goff should be able to put up some points for sure.
Yeah, I like that call. If Nico doesn't come back, definitely Stroud has not been able to function without him as we've become accustomed to seeing him perform. And the Lions are pretty much just a juggernaut right now. They, took business in Green Bay in your home, and, they're rolling. They're a train rolling right now. So yeah, that would be that'd be a good defensive call. Maybe a late swap situation where you keep your defense in the flex out, and you're able to maybe late news comes in if he's kind of on the fence whether he's going to play or not. Something you can maybe shift to if there's late breaking news on whether he's going to play or not, kind of thing. So
yeah, for sure. Yeah, and it'll be an interesting one. You talked about with the Lions, like it's funny how like their prices are just such that they can score, and now they've got Jamison Williams coming back. So they can score 4 or 5 touchdowns, and nobody really has like that standout of a performance. It's just an interesting situation, but also it's one of those where because of that, all of their ownership is going to always stay in check because projection-wise, they don't seem that good for their prices. So it creates a situation where if they do score 4 or 5 touchdowns and it gets condensed in one game, you can make a lot of money in that week, if you're on those right guys. So, yeah, should be an interesting week, should be a fun week. A lot going on with injury reports and whatnot. And then we had some weather stuff pop up last week. We're in November now. So, that stuff's something you're going to have to kind of keep an eye on going forward. So definitely check us out, oneweekseason.com. You can use that code at the bottom there. A lot of good stuff going on. Once again, had a lot of people at the tops of leaderboards in week 9 and looking to finish strong with the second half of the season. You have any parting words, Maximus?
Yeah, guys, check out Mike's FanDuel leverage that he puts up every Saturday, typically late Saturdays, FanDuel player grid. I do Sunday morning thoughts now in the FanDuel Discord tab in the OWS Discord. So look for that. I usually around 10:30, I put that out, the final thoughts kind of thing, just FanDuel specific. And definitely check us out on the site. Keep in touch with us, and let's all get a big win this week.
Absolutely. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Good luck. We will see you on Twitter, on Discord, and at the tops of the leaderboards. Goodbye.